Gen 3 and Gen 4 LS style engines are one of the most popular setups out there. Rightfully so, because they are reliable and they make easy horsepower. But even the almighty LS has the occasional problem. Today we're going out to take a look at Clay's new 5.3 Suburban that he bought recently, and it had a strange knocking noise that he fixed. So he is going to tell us all about that today.
Taking off from my previous video with the red Tahoe, bringing you another LS setup that I picked up here recently. This is a 04 Yukon XL, which is the same thing as your Suburbans, and I'll tell you the situation on it. But going back to the previous video, this is another example of picking up one of these trucks, SUVs, for a fair price, and it's got everything you need for a swap. Now this instance, I really like this truck, so what I'm going to do with it is get it back up and running properly. All right, it's a 04 Yukon XL, and it came with the window sticker in the glove box. Back in 04, it was a $50,000 vehicle, so you can imagine this thing was loaded out. I'm thinking it was probably just a step below the Denali, and of course the Denali is the upper end luxury setup. This one's got leather. It's got the little flip down TV, which is real convenient. It's got auto ride suspension, 410 rear end, posi track at that. Came with the 5.3, whereas Denali's were 6.0s. This is a 5.3. I can't imagine how much this truck weighs, but I guess the point I'm trying to make is this truck, these are available. This one I picked up for $1,500. But I'll go into detail why it was so cheap. And these are available, like I say, 1,500 bucks. Your Tahoes, your Suburbans, your Chevy pickups, typically when your transmission goes out, you can pick them up pretty cheap. $1,500, I'm expecting a bad transmission. Truth be known, this transmission has all 4 gears. It works pretty good. You can tell it's got somewhat high mileage, which 167,000 miles are on this vehicle. However, the issue with this truck, why it was so cheap, is because the engine had a slight knock in it. I say knock. I'd like to refer to it more as a tick. Very common on these LS 5.3s, especially if they've gone through some poor maintenance spells. The lifters start to give them issues. And when I originally got it, I was thinking that's what it was a lifter issue. So I tore it down. I got my money out of it. Paid the 1,500 bucks. Didn't want to put a whole lot of money into it, but it was a nice vehicle. I figured, hey, I can fix this really cheap and easy. So I proceeded to tear the engine down, replace lifters. I thought I had it tracked down exactly which cylinder was giving me the lifter issue. So what I did, I pulled the head off. It was actually the driver's side. Pulled the head off the driver's side, had it pinpointed to the number 7 cylinder on the back, and pulled the lifters. Sure enough, one of the lifters was eaten up. However, when I looked down the lifter bore, I saw that the cam was shot too. The lobe was completely wore off. Anyways, if you've ever seen one of those cam lobes worn out on one of these LS setups, it's pretty self-destructive. So you can just imagine all the little metal particles that go through the engine and all. However, I was going to keep on, so what I did, I ended up pulling the old camshaft out. I put another camshaft in. It was a used camshaft I had, and I knew at that point I didn't really want to spend a whole lot of money on this setup. So, like I say, used camshaft. I went back with the same head gaskets, and I've heard stories people using the same head gaskets. However wrong or taboo that is, I did it. I went back with a harmonic balancer bolt, which you're not supposed to. Went back with the same head bolts. I know all this stuff is taboo. It's not the proper way to do it, but I wanted to give it a try because I was trying to do this for the least amount of money possible. Put it all back together with the used cam, another lifter just in that one spot. Checked out all the lifters. They looked fine, but that one was bad. Put it all back together. It ran pretty good. And my ears aren't as good as some people's ears. My son immediately was like, "Dad, it's still making that ticking noise." I was like, "Are you sure?" So anyways, it was in fact still making the ticking noise. I didn't know what to attribute it to, but I tore back into the engine again. So that's the second time these same head gaskets have been used, the same head bolts, all that stuff's back being used. What I determined was the ticking noise was due to a bent valve. And that's what the ticking noise was coming from. So through deduction and all, I figured out that that cam lobe was warped because that valve was bent and it was causing a binding, and it probably wore out that cam, which tore up the lifter. The second go round when I had the head off, I found that bent valve, and it was barely bent, but it was enough to cause my issues. Put it all back together, and even that first time I put it together, the concern I was having afterwards was the oil pressure. Oil pressure has never been up to where I prefer the oil pressure to be on these 5.3s, which is at idle a little bit over the 40 mark on your dash gauge. And I realize dash gauges are not the most dependable, the most accurate. However, it was all I had to go by, and it's what I went by. This particular vehicle, that gauge was only reading about 20 pounds at idle. That's even at a fresh startup with 2050 oil. So it was always a concern. I got it back up and running, and believe it or not, the truck runs pretty darn good, but there still is that little ticking noise. Once the oil heats up and the engine gets good and warm, oil pressure is not where I like it. So I've made a decision to go ahead and pull this engine out of this vehicle before I do any more damage to it. And I know a lot of people run their 5.3s, they just run them till they're dead. I would like to keep this 5.3, so I don't want to do any more damage to it. So ultimately what I'm gonna end up doing is pulling this engine out and either swapping in a fresh 5.3 or rebuilding this one. The truck is really too nice to part it out and pull everything and do an LS swap, so I really want to see this 5.3 back up and running. If I come across a 6.0, that's even better. I've thrown around the idea isn't this something? I've thrown around the idea.
I got one right here.
I've got an all aluminum 5.7 sitting in there, which like I say, I've tossed around the idea of dropping it down in this truck, but it needs a little bit more torque with as big a body and as heavy as it is. So regardless, 5.3, 5.7, 6.0, it's getting a different cam. So anyways, that's where I'm at with this truck. Of course, all my stuff is budget based, and I can assure you the $1,500 I have in this truck right now, and I'll go ahead and say I probably got another $200 fluids and all that stuff, 2050 oil, filter. So let's just say I've got about $1,700 wrapped up in this thing right as it sits. I'm thinking I can drop in another 5.3 with fresh bearings, fresh rings. Might not even need rings, to be honest with you. I'm hoping I can do this whole setup, get it up and running, be a nice luxury vehicle for the family for under $2,400. I think I can do it. We'll see. But I do have to buy tires for these wheels. And the wheels, this truck actually came with some 20-inch aftermarket wheels. I don't know if they came with the vehicle from the dealership brand new, or somebody in its previous ownership put them on there. They didn't look too bad, but my son ended up selling them for, he bought the vehicle before I did. I bought it off of him. He made a little profit off his dad, which is fine. The 20-inch wheels that were on there, he actually recouped some money off those wheels and put these old Tahoe wheels on it when he sold it to his dad. However, I had these wheels stashed away, had them for several years, put them on here, and I was like, man, those look pretty good on that truck, and for the price, you can't really beat it. So these wheels are going to stay on this truck. I got to get some new tires on it, put another engine in this thing, and I got a little electrical bugs I got to work out, which I don't think is going to be too big of a hassle. And hopefully we'll see this thing cruising up and down the road, making trips to Dallas and Shreveport and Florida possibly. So that's it. These things are still very much available. This is the Gen 3 because it's an 04 model. Once you hit 07, 08, you run into a Gen 4 model. The computer and everything are a little bit more complex on those Gen 4s. However, they are still very much attainable for reasonable prices. I like the Gen 3 because I play with the HP tuners, and that's what I'm used to is Gen 3. So this one should be no different.
Now, one of the things that prompted me to make this video is that it also happened to another friend of mine right around the same time that it happened to Clay. I think it was a Gen 3 5.3 as well. He said he heard a ticking noise and thought it was just a lifter, just like Clay did. He pulled it apart to replace the lifter, and then he saw the flattened cam lobe down the bore. And so he pulled it out, and here's a picture of that camshaft and also a picture of two of the lifters. And I can't say for certain that this was a bent valve as well, because he never pulled ahead. Once he saw this, he just put a different engine he had in it, and I think he just set that one to the side, maybe to deal with sometime in the future. He might have sold it, I don't know. But it's just crazy that one after the other, two friends told me about the same thing happening. And since that other one, it could have just been that a lifter went sideways in the tray and wiped the cam. But still, that's two wiped cams from two friends of mine that are both in the LS world, one after the other. So guys, if y'all have ever had this happen to me, let me know down in the comments.